Walking into that conference room felt like stepping into my own funeral. 20 of my colleagues stood around a table covered with champagne bottles and chocolate cake, their faces glowing with malicious joy. Above them hung a banner that made my stomach drop. Project Phoenix failed in bold red letters. My supervisor, Brad, raised his glass high, grinning, as he announced that my $5 million renewable energy initiative had been officially terminated. The cheers erupted around me like thunder while I stood frozen in the doorway, realizing this public humiliation was his masterpiece. He had orchestrated this celebration to destroy my career after I discovered his embezzlement scheme. I said absolutely nothing, turned around, and walked away early, knowing my reputation lay in ruins. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect. I remember sitting in CEO Margaret Sullivan's corner office, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as she explained why she had chosen me to lead Project Phoenix. At 28, I was already known as the company's environmental technology specialist, having launched 3 successful software platforms that helped corporations reduce their carbon footprint. My Stanford environmental engineering degree, combined with my track record of bringing projects in under budget and ahead of schedule, made me the obvious choice for this groundbreaking renewable energy management system. Johanna, Margaret had said, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. This platform could revolutionize how American businesses approach sustainability. We're talking about software that could reduce industrial emissions by 40% across multiple sectors. She slid a thick folder across her mahogany desk. I'm trusting you with something that could define our company's future. I felt electricity in my veins as I accepted the assignment. This wasn't just about advancing my career. My younger brother Danny had died at age 12 from severe asthma complications. His lungs weakened by years of breathing polluted air in our industrial neighborhood outside Detroit. Every environmental project I touched carried his memory, but Project Phoenix represented something larger than personal healing. This could actually save lives on a national scale. Brad Henderson, my direct supervisor and the vice president of technology, seemed genuinely enthusiastic during our first meeting. He was a tall man with graying temples and expensive suits who had worked at the company for 15 years. Johanna, I've watched your career trajectory, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. This project needs someone with your passion and technical expertise. You'll have my complete support. Those early weeks felt magical. I assembled my core team. Emma Rodriguez, a brilliant project coordinator with an MBA from Northwestern who could organize complex timelines like a symphony conductor. Tyler Washington, a software architect whose code was so elegant it belonged in a museum. And we worked closely with Sarah Chen from HR, who helped navigate the corporate bureaucracy surrounding such a high-profile initiative. The first warning signs appeared subtly. Brad would schedule mandatory departmental meetings during my crucial client presentations, forcing me to choose between team obligations and external partnerships. When I needed budget approvals for specialized environmental sensors, his responses would take weeks instead of the usual 2 days. Key team members would suddenly receive reassignments to other projects without any consultation with me. It's probably just corporate politics, Emma said during one of our late-night planning sessions, her dark eyes reflecting concern as she organized project timelines across her computer screens. Brad manages 12 different initiatives. Maybe he's just overwhelmed. But my instincts screamed otherwise. I started noticing Brad's behavior patterns more carefully. He would ask detailed questions about our proprietary algorithms during team meetings, then disappear for long lunch meetings with people I didn't recognize. His questions weren't supervisory curiosity. They felt like information gathering for purposes I couldn't identify. The breakthrough came accidentally. I was working late one Thursday evening debugging code in the empty office when I heard voices from the conference room. Brad's voice carried clearly through the thin walls as he spoke to someone on speakerphone. The environmental impact calculations are the key differentiator, he was saying. If you can integrate similar functionality 6 months ahead of their launch timeline, You'll capture the entire market before Phoenix even gets regulatory approval. My blood turned cold. He was sharing our proprietary technical details with someone outside the company. I crept closer to the conference room, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid it might give me away. Through the gap under the door, I could see Brad's expensive shoes pacing back and forth. Their lead engineer has developed some innovative pollution modeling algorithms, Brad continued. I can provide the mathematical frameworks if you're interested in licensing discussions. I retreated to my office, mind racing. This wasn't just casual conversation. This sounded like corporate espionage. I spent the rest of the night documenting everything I could remember, creating a detailed timeline of Brad's suspicious behaviors over the past months. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with Sarah Chen in HR. Sarah was a petite woman in her 30s who always wore bright colors and had developed a reputation for handling sensitive employee concerns with discretion. Her office walls were covered with motivational posters about teamwork and corporate values. I need to report some concerns about potential intellectual property violations. I began carefully, not wanting to sound like I was making accusations I couldn't prove. Sarah's expression immediately shifted from welcoming to guarded. She folded her hands on her desk and leaned forward slightly. That's a very serious allegation, Johanna. What specific evidence do you have? I explained what I had overheard, providing the timeline of Brad's unusual behaviors and his detailed knowledge of technical aspects that seemed beyond normal supervisory oversight. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. These are concerning observations, she said finally, but I need you to understand something important. Brad Henderson has been with this company for 15 years. He has an impeccable record and the complete trust of senior leadership. Without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, these could easily be interpreted as workplace personality conflicts. Her words hit me like ice water. Personality conflicts. Project leaders sometimes feel micromanaged when supervisors show interest in technical details. Sarah continued, her tone becoming more condescending. High-stress initiatives can make people hypersensitive to normal corporate interactions. Perhaps you're overreacting due to project pressure. I left that meeting feeling completely isolated. The one system designed to protect employees from misconduct had dismissed my legitimate concerns as emotional instability. Sarah's suggestion that I might be overreacting echoed in my mind for days, making me question my own judgment and professional competence. That evening, I called my father from my apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline orange and purple. Dad had spent 40 years as an environmental scientist for the EPA before retiring, and his wisdom had guided me through every major career decision. Sometimes the most important battles look impossible at the beginning, he said in his steady voice that always calmed my anxiety. When your mother and I fought to get pollution controls implemented in the 70s, people told us we were overreacting too. But science doesn't lie, and neither do your instincts. His words gave me strength, but the loneliness felt overwhelming. I was fighting a battle I couldn't win through official channels, watching my dream project, while my supervisor systematically undermined everything I had worked to build. The first wave of real disappointment washed over me as I realized the corporate systems I had trusted were failing me exactly when I needed them most. The next few weeks transformed me into a detective within my own company. I started arriving early and staying late, not just to advance Project Phoenix, but to document Brad's increasingly suspicious activities. Every meeting, every email, every casual conversation became potential evidence in a case I was building without knowing if anyone would ever believe me. My breakthrough came through Tyler, who approached me hesitantly after a particularly tense team meeting where Brad had questioned our security protocols in unusual detail. "Can I talk to you privately?" Tyler asked, his normally confident demeanor replaced by obvious concern. We walked to the building's rooftop garden, a quiet space where employees sometimes ate lunch surrounded by potted plants and city views. "Something weird is happening with our project files." Tyler began, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "I've been tracking access logs for the Phoenix database, And there are entries from Brad's account during their hours when he should have been in external meetings or offsite entirely. Tyler pulled out his laptop and showed me detailed server logs. His technical expertise made the data crystal clear. Brad had been accessing our most sensitive algorithmic frameworks during late night hours, downloading files that had no legitimate connection to his supervisory responsibilities. Look at this pattern, Tyler said, pointing to timestamps. Every Thursday evening for the past 6 weeks, Brad's account downloads our pollution modeling equations, environmental impact algorithms, and client partnership contracts. Then on Friday mornings, he has those mysterious lunch meetings. This was the concrete evidence I had been seeking. Tyler and I spent the evening developing a secure documentation system, creating encrypted files that tracked Brad's unauthorized access patterns alongside his external meeting schedules. We discovered his activities had escalated far beyond casual curiosity. Emma joined our informal investigation after discovering financial irregularities that made our situation exponentially more serious. She had been reviewing budget allocations for a routine quarterly report when she noticed discrepancies in vendor payments. Look at these invoicing patterns, Emma said, spreading printouts across the conference table during one of our secret after-hours meetings. Brad has been approving payments to consulting firms I've never heard of for services that don't match any project requirements in our documentation. The amounts were staggering. Over the past 18 months, Brad had authorized payments totaling more than $2 million to companies with names like Innovative Solutions Consulting and Advanced Environmental Services. When Emma tried to contact these vendors to verify deliverables, their phone numbers led to disconnected voicemails, and their business addresses turned out to be empty office suites. These aren't legitimate vendors, Emma concluded, her voice tight with anger. These look like shell companies designed to redirect corporate funds. The pattern became clear. Brad wasn't just stealing our intellectual property. He was embezzling company money through fraudulent contracts while simultaneously sabotaging our project to cover his tracks. This wasn't corporate politics or personality conflicts. This was systematic criminal activity. My personal stakes intensified dramatically when my father suffered a heart attack on a Tuesday evening. I rushed to the hospital, finding him pale but conscious in the cardiac care unit surrounded by monitors and IV lines. The doctors assured me his condition was stable, but seeing him so vulnerable reminded me how precious time really was. Tell me about your renewable energy project. Dad whispered, his voice weak, but still carrying that familiar curiosity about my work. I described Project Phoenix's potential impact software that could help hospitals reduce their energy consumption while improving air quality for respiratory patients. His eyes brightened as I explained how our platform could monitor and optimize environmental conditions in medical facilities across the country. Your brother would be so proud, Dad said, squeezing my hand. All those years I spent writing environmental impact reports, dreaming that technology might solve problems I could only document. You're actually building solutions that could save kids like Danny. His words deepened my determination to succeed despite Brad's sabotage. This project wasn't just about my career anymore. It represented hope for families facing environmental health challenges that had devastated my own childhood. But Brad's sabotage was accelerating. During the following week, I discovered he had been systematically introducing subtle errors into our codebase. These weren't obvious bugs that would be caught during routine testing. They were sophisticated alterations designed to cause system failures during high-pressure demonstrations. Tyler found the evidence buried deep in our version control logs. He's been using administrative access to modify core algorithms, Tyler explained, his face grim as he showed me the tampered code. These changes would make our environmental calculations produce impossible results during client presentations. The manipulation was diabolical in its sophistication. Brad had introduced errors that would remain dormant during internal testing, but would cause catastrophic failures when the software analyzed real-world data during investor presentations. Our pollution reduction calculations would show negative numbers, Energy efficiency projections would display backward graphs, and environmental impact assessments would suggest our platform actually increased emissions rather than reducing them. He's timing this to coincide with the board presentation. I realized with growing horror, $50 million in investor funding depends on that demonstration. If our software fails publicly, it won't just kill Project Phoenix. It could destroy the company's credibility in the entire environmental technology sector. Emma uncovered another disturbing development Brad had recruited. David Palmer, an ambitious junior manager from the marketing department, to spy on our activities. David began showing up at our team meetings uninvited, asking probing questions about our security measures and backup procedures. When Emma confronted him directly, he claimed Brad had assigned him to provide additional project oversight during this critical development phase. David's been asking specific questions about your access codes and authentication procedures. Emma warned me after catching him trying to look over her shoulder while she entered her password. I think Brad is planning to frame you for the problems he's creating. The pressure was becoming unbearable. I felt like I was racing against a ticking bomb, trying to expose Brad's crimes while preventing him from destroying not only my project, but potentially my entire career through fabricated evidence. Every day brought new sabotage attempts, each more sophisticated than the last. Tyler discovered that Brad had convinced the IT department to provide him with emergency administrative access to all Project Phoenix systems, claiming he needed to monitor security vulnerabilities in high-value initiatives. This gave him unlimited ability to modify our code access, our communications, and plant false evidence suggesting financial mismanagement. "We're running out of time," Tyler said during one of our increasingly desperate strategy sessions. "If Brad gets another 2 weeks to perfect his sabotage, there won't be any way to prove what really happened. The evidence will be so contaminated that even forensic analysis won't be able to separate his alterations from our legitimate work." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of an impossible situation. Brad held all the institutional power, had access to every system, and had built relationships with key decision-makers over 15 years. Meanwhile, I had circumstantial evidence and the support of 2 colleagues who could also be dismissed as disgruntled employees if Brad chose to target them. But I thought about Danny, about my father's pride in environmental progress, and about all the hospitals and schools that could benefit from clean energy technology. Giving up wasn't an option, even when the odds seemed completely hopeless. The trap sprang faster than I had anticipated. On a Monday morning that started like any other, Brad called an emergency department meeting that would change everything. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as 25 staff members filed in, unsure why they had been summoned with only 30 minutes' notice. Brad entered wearing his most expensive navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and projecting the confidence of someone about to deliver excellent news. He moved to the front of the room with theatrical precision, allowing silence to build before speaking. "I have an exciting announcement." Brad began, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "The board of directors has requested that we accelerate Project Phoenix's final demonstration. Instead of our planned timeline, we'll be presenting to investors and board members in exactly 2 weeks." My stomach dropped. 2 weeks meant insufficient time to debug the sabotaged software, inadequate preparation for such a critical presentation, and no opportunity to expose Brad's crimes before he could frame me for the inevitable failure. "This acceleration demonstrates the board's confidence in our team's capabilities," Brad continued, his eyes finding mine across the room. "It's also an excellent opportunity to test our project leadership's ability to perform under pressure. True innovators thrive when faced with compressed timelines and elevated expectations." Emma shot me a worried glance from across the room. Tyler's face had gone pale as he surely calculated the impossibility of identifying and fixing Brad's code alterations within such a restricted time frame. The other team members looked excited, unaware they were watching their project's execution being scheduled. After the meeting, I tried to approach Brad privately, hoping to negotiate a more reasonable timeline. He listened to my concerns with a patronizing smile that made my skin crawl. Johanna, I understand you might feel overwhelmed, he said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. Managing high stakes projects requires adaptability and grace under pressure. If you don't feel capable of meeting this timeline, I could recommend that we reassign Project Phoenix to someone with more experience handling board level presentations. The threat was clear: accept the impossible timeline or lose my project entirely. Either way, Brad achieved his goal of ensuring Project Phoenix's failure while maintaining plausible deniability about his role in that failure. The sabotage intensified immediately. That same afternoon, Emma received official notification that she was being temporarily reassigned to another department due to budget restructuring requirements. Losing Emma meant losing my most trusted ally and our most skilled project coordinator during the most critical 2 weeks of the entire initiative. This isn't coincidence, Emma said as she packed her office supplies, tears of frustration in her eyes. Brad orchestrated this transfer to isolate you right when you need support most. He's removing anyone who might help you succeed or witness what he's doing. Tyler tried to compensate for Emma's absence by working 18-hour days, but Brad's administrative access allowed him to introduce new problems faster than we could identify existing ones. Our code base became a minefield of sophisticated errors designed to remain hidden until the moment of public demonstration. David Palmer's spying intensified as well. He obtained my system access codes through social engineering, convincing our IT support staff that Brad had authorized him to assist with security auditing on my behalf. With my credentials, Brad could now plant false evidence directly in my user accounts, creating a paper trail that would suggest I had been embezzling funds and sabotaging my own project. The evidence fabrication was masterful. Brad created fake email exchanges between my account and offshore vendors showing apparent negotiations for personal kickbacks in exchange for inflated service contracts. He modified financial documents to suggest I had been redirecting Project Phoenix funds to personal accounts, then planted anonymous tips with the accounting department about irregularities in environmental project spending. 3 days before the scheduled presentation, Tyler made a devastating discovery. While conducting final security checks, he found that Brad had introduced a logic bomb into our core software, a piece of malicious code designed to trigger during the investor presentation, causing our entire system to display impossible results. "Look at this," Tyler said, his voice shaking as he showed me the hidden code. When our software analyzes the sample data during the board presentation, every calculation will produce results that are mathematically impossible. Our pollution reduction estimates will show negative numbers. Energy efficiency graphs will display backward trends, and environmental impact projections will suggest our platform actually increases emissions by 300%. The logic bomb was timed to activate precisely when our software would be under maximum scrutiny, ensuring that 50 major investors would witness what appeared to be catastrophic incompetence. Brad had designed the failure to be so spectacular that no one would question whether technical sabotage might be involved. "Can we remove it?" I asked, though Tyler's expression already provided the answer. "He's embedded it so deeply into the core algorithms that removing it would require rebuilding the entire software framework from scratch," Tyler explained. "Even if we worked 24 hours a day for the next 3 days, we couldn't complete that reconstruction before the presentation." That evening, I received a call that shattered my remaining hope. Sarah Chen from HR informed me that serious concerns had been raised about my project management and financial oversight. An emergency investigation was being launched to examine potential misconduct in my handling of Project Phoenix resources. "You're required to attend a formal disciplinary hearing tomorrow morning," Sarah informed me, her voice coldly professional. "I strongly recommend you consider legal representation and begin preparing documentation to support your version of events." The timing was perfect from Brad's perspective. The disciplinary hearing would occur just 2 days before the investor presentation, ensuring that any evidence I might present about his sabotage would be dismissed as desperate attempts to deflect attention from my own misconduct. I called my father that night, needing to hear his voice, even though I couldn't explain the full complexity of my situation without causing him additional stress during his recovery. Dad, what do you do when you know the truth but can't prove it to people who have already decided not to believe you? I asked. Sometimes the only choice is to keep fighting even when defeat seems certain, he replied thoughtfully. Your mother and I faced situations where powerful interests wanted to suppress environmental research that threatened their profits. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, but it requires courage to keep standing up for what's right even when you're standing alone. His words provided emotional strength, but the practical reality remained overwhelming. Brad controlled every institutional lever of power, had months to perfect his frame job, and had successfully isolated me from potential allies. The disciplinary hearing would likely result in my termination just hours before the investor presentation that would destroy Project Phoenix's credibility forever. That night, I lay in bed reviewing the past months, searching for any overlooked detail that might provide a path forward. Brad's plan was diabolical in its completeness. He had embezzled millions while simultaneously destroying the environmental project that could have exposed his crimes, all while positioning me to take responsibility for both the financial theft and the technical failures. The morning of the disciplinary hearing arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly, as I prepared to face what felt like professional execution. I thought about Danny, about renewable energy technologies that could protect other children from environmental health problems, and about the principle that truth should matter more than political power. Walking into that hearing, I knew I was probably attending my own career funeral, but I also knew that sometimes the most important battles are fought not because victory seems likely, but because the alternative is surrendering everything you believe in. The disciplinary hearing was a masterpiece of corporate theater designed to provide the appearance of due process while reaching a predetermined conclusion. Sarah Chen sat at the head of a mahogany conference table flanked by two senior HR representatives I didn't recognize, and a company attorney whose presence made the proceedings feel like a trial. Brad occupied a chair across from me, portraying perfect concern and disappointment about the troubling allegations surrounding my conduct. His performance was flawless, the reluctant supervisor forced to report problematic behavior from a previously trusted employee. We've received documentation suggesting serious financial irregularities in Project Phoenix management. Sarah began opening a thick folder. Unauthorized vendor payments, suspicious account transfers, and concerning communication patterns with external entities. She spread printouts across the table showing the fabricated evidence Brad had planted in my accounts. The fake emails looked authentic, complete with realistic timestamps and believable technical details about our project specifications. The financial documents suggested I had redirected over $800,000 to offshore accounts through fraudulent consulting contracts. These documents appear to show systematic embezzlement spanning the past 4 months. The company attorney said, his tone professionally neutral but clearly skeptical of any explanation I might provide. Can you explain these transactions and communications? I tried to present my evidence about Brad's actual crimes, but every document I offered was dismissed as either irrelevant or potentially fabricated to deflect blame. When I mentioned the server logs showing Brad's unauthorized access patterns, Sarah suggested that disgruntled employees sometimes create false documentation to support unfounded accusations. Furthermore, Brad added with perfect timing, I've noticed concerning changes in Johanna's behavior over recent months. Increased paranoia, unfounded accusations against colleagues, and defensive responses to normal supervisory oversight. These could indicate personal stress affecting her professional judgment. The hearing lasted 90 minutes, during which my professional reputation was systematically dismantled. By the time it concluded, I had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation, Security would escort me from the building within the hour, and I was prohibited from accessing any company systems or contacting project team members. We take these allegations very seriously, Sarah concluded with false sympathy. If the investigation confirms our preliminary findings, termination and potential criminal charges would be appropriate responses. Walking through the office hallways with a security guard felt like a perp walk. Colleagues who had once greeted me warmly now avoided eye contact, whispering among themselves about the Project Phoenix scandal. My career was being destroyed in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The final humiliation came that afternoon when Brad's celebration party materialized. Word spread quickly that Project Phoenix had been officially terminated due to leadership failures and financial improprieties. The impromptu gathering in the main conference room felt like a wake for my professional life. I arrived to collect personal items from my office and stumbled into the party by accident. The banner reading, Project Phoenix Failed, hung above a table laden with champagne and chocolate cake. 20 colleagues who had once respected my work now laughed and applauded as Brad delivered a speech thanking everyone for supporting necessary corporate house cleaning. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made to protect our company's integrity, Brad announced, raising his glass high. Project Phoenix represented misguided environmental fantasies that would have wasted investor resources on impractical technologies. Today, we return to focusing on profitable, realistic business solutions. The crowd cheered. People who had attended my project presentations, who had claimed to support renewable energy initiatives, now celebrated the destruction of everything I had worked to build. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional setback I had ever experienced. I said nothing, turned around, and left early. What was there to say? My reputation lay in ruins. My evidence had been dismissed, and my career in environmental technology seemed permanently finished. Driving home through the rain, I felt completely defeated for the first time in my adult life. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at resignation letters I had started writing. My father called to check on me, sensing something was wrong, but I couldn't bear to explain how completely I had failed. He had expressed such pride in Project Phoenix's potential impact, and now I would have to tell him that his daughter had been fired for embezzlement and incompetence. Around midnight, I decided to review project files one final time before submitting my resignation. If I was leaving environmental technology forever, I wanted to understand exactly how Brad had accomplished such a complete victory. Perhaps analyzing his techniques could help me avoid similar traps in future careers, assuming anyone would ever hire me again after this scandal became public. Opening my encrypted backup files, I began methodically reviewing the evidence Tyler and Emma had helped me compile. Brad's unauthorized access patterns, the suspicious vendor payments, the timeline of his sabotage activities. All of this would disappear once the company seized my equipment and purged my accounts. Then I found it. Buried in the metadata of Brad's fake vendor contracts was a digital signature timestamp that proved his guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. In his rush to frame me, Brad had made a critical error that would expose his entire scheme. The digital signatures on the fraudulent contracts contained embedded timestamps showing exactly when they had been created and modified. According to these timestamps, Brad had been accessing Project Phoenix systems and creating fake vendor documentation during the precise hours when our software bugs were being introduced. More damning still, the IP address logs showed Brad's location during these activities. He had been working from his home computer during late-night hours when he should have been at company-sponsored events with verifiable alibis. The metadata bazata proved he had been simultaneously sabotaging our code and creating the false evidence to frame me for financial crimes. My hand shook as I realized the significance of this discovery. Brad's entire frame job depended on the assumption that no one would examine the technical metadata underlying his fabricated evidence. He had created seemingly perfect documentation, but had overlooked the digital fingerprints that proved his guilt. I spent the next 2 hours verifying every detail, ensuring I understood exactly what the evidence demonstrated. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. This was irrefutable proof that Brad had committed both embezzlement and systematic sabotage while framing me for his crimes. But who would believe me? HR had already decided I was guilty. The company attorney seemed convinced of my culpability, and Brad held 15 years of institutional credibility. Presenting this evidence through normal channels would likely result in additional accusations that I had fabricated technical documentation to support desperate lies. Then Tyler sent an encrypted message to my personal email account. "Can you talk? I've found something important." We met at an all-night diner downtown away from any possibility of corporate surveillance. Tyler arrived carrying a laptop and wearing the grim expression of someone who had uncovered terrible truths. "I've been conducting my own investigation since they put you on administrative leave," Tyler began, keeping his voice low despite the empty restaurant. Brad tried to recruit Maria Santos from cybersecurity into his scheme, but she refused and has been building her own case. Tyler showed me server logs that confirmed everything I had suspected and more. Brad's embezzlement extended to 4 other company projects over the past 2 years, totaling nearly $3 million in stolen funds. The offshore accounts were already established and contained money that had been systematically redirected through fake consulting contracts. "Maria has been monitoring suspicious system activities for months," Tyler continued. "She couldn't act without concrete evidence, but now we have enough documentation to prove everything. Brad's planning to disappear within 48 hours with the stolen money, probably to a country without extradition treaties." The scope of Brad's crimes was staggering. He hadn't just sabotaged my project, he had been systematically looting the company while destroying any investigations that might expose his activities. Project Phoenix had been terminated not because it lacked merit, but because its success might have led to financial audits that would reveal his embezzlement. "There's something else," Tyler said, his expression growing even more serious. "Maria discovered that Brad has been planning to frame CEO Margaret Sullivan for the embezzlement. He's planted false evidence in her email accounts and prepared anonymous tips to federal regulators that would destroy her reputation while clearing his escape route." This revelation changed everything. Brad wasn't just stealing money and sabotaging projects, he was preparing to bring down the entire company leadership to cover his tracks. Margaret Sullivan, who had trusted me with Project Phoenix and believed in environmental innovation, was being set up to take responsibility for Brad's crimes. I called my father when I got home, finally ready to share some version of what had happened. "Dad, remember what you told me about environmental activists who persevered despite corporate opposition?" I asked. "Of course. Your mother and I faced situations where powerful interests tried to suppress research that threatened their profits. Why do you ask? I'm in one of those situations now. Someone is trying to destroy important environmental work to protect their own criminal activities. I have evidence of their crimes, but they hold all the institutional power." "Then you fight," Dad said without hesitation. "Not because victory is guaranteed, but because the alternative is letting injustice win. Your brother didn't get the chance to fight for clean air, but you do. Honor his memory by refusing to surrender what's right." His words reminded me that this battle was bigger than my career or even Project Phoenix. This was about preventing criminals from profiting while environmental technologies that could save lives were destroyed to cover their tracks. I couldn't let Brad escape with stolen millions while framing innocent people for his crimes. That night, I made a decision that would determine the rest of my life. Instead of resigning in defeat, I would fight back with every piece of evidence I could gather. Brad had made critical errors in his overconfidence, and I was going to exploit every single one of them. The next morning, I started preparing for the most important battle of my professional life. Working through the night, I transformed from a defeated victim into a strategic prosecutor building an airtight case. Tyler Maria Santos from cybersecurity and I established secure communication channels and began compiling evidence that would expose the full scope of Brad's criminal enterprise. Maria turned out to be the ally I had desperately needed without knowing she existed. A 10-year cybersecurity veteran with expertise in financial fraud investigation, she had been quietly documenting Brad's suspicious activities for months while waiting for sufficient evidence to act. Brad approached me 6 weeks ago, Maria explained during our clandestine meeting in her home office, surrounded by multiple computer monitors and forensic analysis equipment. He claimed there were security vulnerabilities in Project Phoenix and offered me a promotion if I would help him gain administrative access to your systems. When I refused, he threatened to have me transferred to a different department. Maria's investigation had uncovered the same patterns we had identified, but with additional technical depth that made our case irrefutable. Her access to server logs, financial transaction records, and communication metadata provided comprehensive documentation of Brad's crimes spanning multiple years. The embezzlement is much larger than we initially thought. Maria continued, pulling up spreadsheets that made my stomach drop. Brad has been stealing from the company for over 3 years using increasingly sophisticated methods to hide the theft. The total amount approaches $4 million. Tyler had spent the past 48 hours conducting his own digital forensics investigation, recovering deleted files and analyzing code modification patterns that proved Brad's sabotage activities. His technical expertise revealed the full extent of how our software had been compromised. "Look at this timeline," Tyler said, showing us a detailed chronological analysis. Every single bug introduction corresponds exactly with Brad's system access logs. He's been methodically destroying our codebase for weeks, introducing errors that would remain dormant until the investor presentation. The scope of evidence was overwhelming, but Maria identified a critical problem: Brad was accelerating his timeline for escaping the country. Financial records showed he had already begun transferring stolen funds to offshore accounts and had purchased airline tickets to countries without extradition treaties with the United States. "He's planning to vanish within 36 hours, Maria warned. "Once he leaves the country, recovering the stolen money and prosecuting his crimes becomes exponentially more difficult. We need to act immediately." Meanwhile, Emma had returned from her forced transfer with additional evidence that strengthened our case. During her brief assignment to another department, she had connected with other employees who had experienced similar patterns of sabotage and retaliation when their projects threatened to expose financial irregularities. "3 other women have stories nearly identical to yours," Emma reported during our emergency strategy session. "Brad systematically targets successful female project leaders, sabotages their work, then frames them for the problems he creates. It's a pattern that's been happening for years, but no one ever had enough evidence to prove it." These additional testimonies provided crucial context for Brad's behavior, demonstrating that Project Phoenix wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern of discrimination and criminal activity. The other women agreed to provide formal statements supporting our case. But our most shocking discovery came when Maria's investigation revealed Brad's ultimate plan. He intended to frame CEO Margaret Sullivan for the embezzlement scheme before disappearing with the stolen funds. He had spent months planting false evidence in Margaret's email accounts and preparing anonymous tips to federal investigators that would destroy her reputation while clearing his escape route. Brad's been positioning himself as the whistleblower who discovered Margaret's supposed crimes, Maria explained, showing us fabricated email exchanges and falsified financial documents. His plan requires him to appear as the hero who exposed corporate corruption, which provides perfect cover for his own disappearance with stolen money. This revelation changed our entire strategic approach. We weren't just fighting to clear my name and save Project Phoenix. We were racing to prevent the destruction of our CEO and potentially the entire company. Brad's scheme would leave devastation in its wake while he escaped to enjoy stolen millions in international luxury. Tyler made a crucial observation about timing. Brad scheduled tomorrow's final performance review meeting with you for 9 a.m., the same time he's planned to submit his anonymous tips about Margaret to federal investigators. He intends to terminate your employment while simultaneously triggering an investigation that will consume all corporate attention and resources. The performance review meeting was clearly intended to be my professional execution, providing Brad with final documentation of my misconduct before he escaped the country. But it also represented our only opportunity to confront him before his plan reached completion. We need to reach Margaret Sullivan before Brad's anonymous tips trigger a federal investigation, I realized. Once regulators get involved, the false evidence will be treated as credible until proven otherwise, which could take months of expensive legal proceedings. Maria had already prepared comprehensive documentation packages containing all our evidence, server logs, financial records, digital forensics analysis, witness testimonies, and technical proof of Brad's sabotage activities. The evidence was so extensive and detailed that it would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. We have enough proof to convict Brad of embezzlement, corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy, Maria concluded, but only if we can present it before he disappears and while the evidence chains remain intact. Emma suggested that we contact Patricia Williams, Margaret Sullivan's executive assistant, to request an urgent meeting. Patricia had a reputation for protecting Margaret's time carefully, but also for recognizing genuinely critical situations that required immediate attention. Patricia has worked with Margaret for 12 years, Emma noted. If we explain that we have evidence of crimes that directly threaten the CEO and the company, she'll understand the urgency and arrange a meeting. That evening, I made the phone call that would determine everything. Patricia Williams listened carefully as I explained that I had urgent security concerns affecting company leadership and needed to meet with Margaret Sullivan immediately. This involves potential crimes that could destroy the company's reputation and personally harm Margaret if not addressed within the next 24 hours, I said, choosing my words carefully to convey urgency without sounding like a disgruntled employee making desperate accusations. Patricia's experience had taught her to recognize genuine emergencies. After asking several pointed questions about the nature of my concerns, she scheduled an emergency meeting for the following morning at 8 a.m., 1 hour before Brad's planned performance review and federal whistleblowing activities. Margaret will see you at 8 sharp, Patricia said. I hope you understand the seriousness of requesting emergency access to her schedule. This had better be as critical as you're claiming. It is, I assured her, knowing that our evidence would speak for itself. Tyler, Maria, and I spent the final night organizing our presentation materials and preparing for what felt like the most important meeting of our professional lives. We had one opportunity to expose Brad's crimes and save both Margaret Sullivan and Project Phoenix from destruction. As dawn broke over the city, I realized that within a few hours, either justice would be served or Brad would escape with stolen millions while innocent people suffered the consequences of his crimes. Everything depended on our ability to present the truth convincingly before Brad's carefully orchestrated lies could take hold. The battle for truth was about to begin. 14 hours after Brad's humiliating celebration party, Patricia Williams called my cell phone with the news that would change everything. Margaret will see you immediately, Patricia said, her voice carrying the urgency that comes from working with someone who recognizes genuine crises. She's cleared her morning schedule after I briefed her on the nature of your concerns. Please arrive at her office within the next 30 minutes. Walking through the corporate lobby that morning felt surreal. Just yesterday, I had been escorted out as a suspected embezzler, but now I was returning as someone with evidence that could save the company from systematic criminal destruction. Security guards who had witnessed my humiliation now nodded respectfully, unaware of the dramatic reversal about to unfold. Margaret Sullivan's corner office commanded panoramic views of the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning sunlight and reflected it across polished mahogany furniture. Margaret sat behind her executive desk, wearing a charcoal business suit, her expression serious but open, as I entered carrying my carefully organized evidence portfolio. Patricia explained you have urgent security concerns affecting company leadership. Margaret began without preamble. Given the serious allegations surrounding your recent administrative leave, I need to understand exactly what you're claiming and why it couldn't wait for normal channels. I spread our comprehensive evidence package across her conference table server logs, documenting Brad's unauthorized access patterns, financial records proving systematic embezzlement, digital forensics analysis showing code sabotage activities, and witness testimonies from multiple employees who had experienced similar retaliation. Brad Henderson has been embezzling company funds for over 3 years. I began walking Margaret through the technical evidence step by step. He's stolen nearly $4 million through fake vendor contracts while simultaneously sabotaging Project Phoenix to prevent financial audits that might expose his crimes. Margaret examined each piece of evidence carefully, her expression growing increasingly grave as the scope of Brad's criminal enterprise became clear. Her 15 years of executive experience had taught her to distinguish between workplace complaints and genuine security threats, and our documentation clearly fell into the latter category. These server logs show systematic, unauthorized access, Margaret noted, reviewing Tyler's technical analysis. And these financial patterns are consistent with sophisticated embezzlement schemes I've encountered in previous positions. But you're claiming Brad has also been framing you for his crimes. I showed her the digital timestamp evidence that proved Brad had created fabricated documentation during the exact hours when our software was being sabotaged. The metadata that say analysis made his guilt irrefutable. He had been simultaneously stealing money and destroying evidence while planting false documentation to shift blame onto me. Furthermore, I continued, Maria Santos from cybersecurity discovered that Brad plans to frame you for the embezzlement before fleeing the country. He's prepared anonymous tips to federal investigators and planted false evidence in your email accounts. This revelation made Margaret's face harden with controlled anger. As CEO, she understood that false accusations from federal regulators could destroy both her personal reputation and the company's stock value, regardless of eventual vindication. Show me this evidence about threats to my position, Margaret demanded. Maria's investigation had uncovered Brad's complete frame job, fabricated email exchanges suggesting Margaret had approved fraudulent vendor payments, falsified financial records indicating her knowledge of the embezzlement, and prepared anonymous tips to regulatory agencies, claiming she had been covering up corporate crimes. Brad's plan requires him to appear as a whistleblower who exposed your supposed misconduct, I explained. This provides perfect cover for his disappearance with stolen funds while you face federal investigation and public scandal. Margaret studied the fabricated evidence with the focused intensity of someone whose survival instincts had been activated. Her decades of corporate leadership had prepared her for many threats, but systematic criminal sabotage from within her own executive team represented a uniquely dangerous situation. When is Brad planning to implement this frame job? Margaret asked. This morning, he scheduled what he claimed would be my final performance review for 9 a.m. the same time he plans to submit anonymous tips to federal investigators. Once regulatory agencies receive his false accusations, they'll be obligated to launch investigations that could take months to resolve. Margaret reached for her phone to call security, but I stopped her. There's something else you need to know. Brad should be arriving for our meeting in approximately 15 minutes. If we coordinate with law enforcement now, we can catch him in the act of implementing his escape plan. Margaret's expression shifted from anger to strategic calculation. She had built her career on making difficult decisions under pressure, and this situation required immediate action to prevent irreversible damage. Patricia, connect me with our corporate legal counsel immediately, Margaret instructed via intercom. Also, contact the FBI's white-collar crime division and request emergency assistance for an ongoing embezzlement investigation. Tell them we have a suspect who may flee the country within hours. While Margaret coordinated with law enforcement, I called Tyler and Maria to confirm they were prepared to provide technical testimony about Brad's crimes. Our evidence was comprehensive enough to support immediate arrest warrants, but timing would be critical to prevent Brad's escape. At exactly 9 a.m., Brad Henderson walked into Margaret's conference room expecting to conduct my final termination meeting. Instead, he found Margaret Sullivan, me, Maria Santos, our corporate legal counsel, and two FBI agents who had been monitoring his offshore financial activities for the past hour. Brad's face went through a fascinating series of expressions as he processed the scene confusion about the unexpected attendees' recognition that his plans had been discovered, and finally resignation as he realized his criminal enterprise was collapsing around him. Brad Henderson, the lead FBI agent, began. You're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy, and computer crimes. You have the right to remain silent. Brad attempted to maintain his innocence, launching into prepared explanations about discovering financial irregularities and trying to protect the company from my supposed misconduct. But when confronted with our technical evidence, including the digital timestamps that proved his guilt beyond doubt, his composure cracked completely. I was trying to save this company from environmental extremists who would have bankrupted us with impractical green technology, Brad said, revealing his true motivations for the first time. Project Phoenix was a waste of resources that would have destroyed shareholder value while accomplishing nothing meaningful. His confession exposed the ideological hatred underlying his crimes. Brad hadn't just stolen money. He had systematically destroyed environmental initiatives because he opposed clean technology on principle. My project had been targeted not because it threatened to expose his embezzlement, but because he fundamentally rejected renewable energy innovation. Meanwhile, David Palmer was brought in for questioning and immediately confessed to his role in Brad's conspiracy when faced with serious federal charges. His cooperation provided additional evidence about Brad's systematic targeting of female employees and his long-term embezzlement activities. With Brad's sabotage removed, Tyler and Maria quickly restored Project Phoenix's original software, revealing that our environmental platform had actually exceeded all performance targets. The renewable energy management system worked exactly as designed, capable of reducing corporate emissions by 42%, while saving companies substantial money on energy costs. Project Phoenix isn't just viable, Tyler reported to Margaret during an emergency board meeting that afternoon. It's revolutionary. Once implemented at scale, this platform could transform how American businesses approach environmental compliance and energy efficiency. Margaret's response was swift and decisive. She announced my immediate promotion to Vice President of Innovation, the position Brad had been seeking for himself. The board unanimously approved Project Phoenix for full implementation with expanded funding of $12 million, recognizing its potential for national environmental impact. Furthermore, Margaret announced publicly, the company formally apologizes to Johanna for the injustice she suffered while protecting our organization from criminal sabotage. Her courage and integrity prevented far greater damage to our reputation and financial stability. Brad Henderson received an 8-year federal prison sentence for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The stolen funds were fully recovered and, at my suggestion, donated to environmental charities focused on air quality improvement in low-income communities. His criminal conviction also triggered civil liability that stripped him of all remaining assets. Justice had been served, but more importantly, truth had prevailed over systematic deception and abuse of power. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Brad had celebrated my supposed failure, but now the atmosphere hummed with productive energy as my team prepared for Project Phoenix's national launch. The renewable energy platform had exceeded every performance metric, earning recognition from the Environmental Protection Agency and attracting implementation contracts from over 200 American corporations. The transformation felt miraculous. Where Brad's banner had once proclaimed, Project Phoenix failed, now hung a plaque reading Innovation Center for Sustainable Technology, with my name listed as founding director. The space buzzed with engineers, environmental scientists, and business analysts working on expanding our platform to serve hospitals, schools, and municipal governments across the country. Emma Rodriguez had become my deputy director, using her organizational brilliance to coordinate implementation projects that would impact millions of Americans. Tyler Washington led our technical innovation team, developing advanced algorithms that made renewable energy management increasingly sophisticated and effective. Maria Santos directed our expanded cybersecurity division, protecting other companies from the kind of systematic sabotage we had experienced. Even the personal rewards felt meaningful. My father, fully recovered from his heart attack, had visited our offices to see Project Phoenix environmental impact reports. Watching his face light up as he reviewed data showing measurable air quality improvements in industrial areas reminded me why this work mattered beyond corporate success. Your brother would be so proud, Dad said, studying charts that documented reduced respiratory illness rates in communities using our pollution monitoring systems. All those years I spent writing environmental impact reports, hoping technology might solve problems I could only measure. You're actually building solutions that save lives. Project Phoenix's success had ripple effects throughout the environmental technology sector. Our platform's effectiveness convinced skeptical investors that clean energy initiatives could generate substantial profits while creating positive social impact. The renewable energy management industry experienced unprecedented growth as corporations recognized both the financial benefits and environmental necessity of sustainable practices. But the most satisfying aspect was the mentorship program I established for young environmental engineers, particularly women facing workplace discrimination. Every month, I met with recent graduates who had encountered similar challenges to what I had experienced, sharing strategies for navigating corporate politics while maintaining ethical principles. Remember that professional setbacks often reveal hidden opportunities for greater achievements, I told each mentorship group. When powerful people try to destroy your work, it usually means you're creating something that threatens their unjust advantages. That's exactly when persistence becomes most important. The program attracted national attention, leading to speaking engagements at universities and environmental conferences where I shared lessons about courage, integrity, and strategic thinking in the face of systematic opposition. Young engineers needed to understand that innovative solutions often required fighting institutional resistance from people who profited from existing problems. Sarah Chen faced disciplinary action for failing to investigate legitimate whistleblower concerns, eventually accepting a transfer to a different company where her dismissive attitude toward employee complaints wouldn't affect vulnerable workers. Her replacement instituted new protocols, ensuring that reports of financial misconduct and workplace retaliation would receive thorough, unbiased investigation. David Palmer received a suspended sentence in exchange for his cooperation with federal investigators, but lost his position and struggled to find employment after his role in the conspiracy became public. His experience served as a cautionary tale about the personal consequences of choosing ambition over ethics when recruited into criminal schemes. The legal proceedings also revealed that Brad's crimes extended beyond our company. Federal investigators discovered similar embezzlement patterns at his previous employers, suggesting a career built on systematic theft disguised as corporate leadership. His conviction led to additional prosecutions and the recovery of millions in stolen funds across multiple organizations. Project Phoenix's environmental impact exceeded our most optimistic projections. Hospitals using our platform reported 30% reductions in energy costs alongside improved air quality that correlated with better patient outcomes for respiratory conditions. School districts achieved similar energy savings while creating healthier learning environments for children who might otherwise develop asthma and other pollution-related health problems. The success attracted international attention with European and Asian companies licensing our technology to implement similar renewable energy management systems. Project Phoenix evolved from a single corporate initiative into a global movement toward more sustainable industrial practices. During quiet moments, I often reflected on the profound life lesson this experience had taught me. Authentic success requires the courage to stand for truth, even when facing overwhelming opposition from people who hold institutional power. Professional integrity means fighting for what's right regardless of personal costs, because principles matter more than convenience or safety. The battle against Brad had demonstrated that systematic injustice often disguises itself as normal corporate politics, making it difficult to recognize until the damage becomes severe. But it also proved that careful documentation, strategic alliances, and persistent advocacy could overcome even sophisticated criminal schemes supported by years of institutional credibility. Most importantly, I learned that environmental work isn't just about technology or policy, it's about justice for communities that suffer disproportionate health impacts from pollution while powerful interests prioritize profits over human welfare. Every renewable energy project represents a choice between protecting vulnerable people and maintaining systems that benefit from environmental degradation. 6 months after our victory, I received a call that perfectly captured why this work mattered. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a pediatric pulmonologist in Detroit, contacted me to share data about reduced asthma hospitalizations in neighborhoods where schools had implemented Project Phoenix's air quality monitoring systems. We're seeing significant improvements in children's respiratory health, Dr. Martinez reported. The real-time pollution monitoring allows schools to adjust ventilation systems and outdoor activity schedules to protect kids with breathing problems. Parents are telling me their children are using rescue inhalers less frequently and missing fewer school days due to asthma attacks. Hearing about children who could breathe easier because of our environmental technology brought tears to my eyes. Danny hadn't lived to benefit from innovations like Project Phoenix, but other kids would grow up healthier because people had fought to create clean technology despite criminal opposition. That evening, I called my father to share Dr. Martinez's report about improved pediatric health outcomes. His voice filled with pride as he processed the real-world impact of our environmental work. This is what your mother and I dreamed about during those early years of environmental activism, Dad said. Technology that actually protects children instead of just measuring the problems they face. You've turned environmental science into environmental action. As I finished this conversation, I realized the most profound truth about justice and integrity in professional life. The most meaningful victories aren't about personal advancement or financial rewards, but about creating positive change that outlasts your individual career. When you fight for principles larger than yourself, success becomes a gift you'll give to people you may never meet. Project Phoenix represented more than successful software development. It embodied the possibility that courage and persistence could overcome systematic corruption while creating innovations that protect vulnerable communities. Every hospital that reduced its energy costs, every school that improved its air quality, every child who breathed easier represented victory over people who prioritized personal profit above human welfare. Standing in our innovation center, watching brilliant engineers develop technologies that would help heal our planet's environmental damage, I felt deeply grateful for the battle that had brought us here. Brad's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed the extraordinary power of people working together to defend what's right. The future looked bright for renewable energy, innovation, environmental justice, and the principle that truth ultimately prevails over deception when good people refuse to surrender. So let me ask you this. Have you ever faced a situation where someone in power tried to destroy your work or reputation to cover their own wrongdoing? How did you find the courage to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless? I'd love to hear your stories of perseverance in the comments below. If this story inspired you to never give up on what's right, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for their principles. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who who accomplished extraordinary things by refusing to let injustice win. Thank you so much for listening, and remember that your integrity is worth fighting for no matter how powerful the opposition might seem. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones that feel impossible until you realize that truth and courage can overcome any obstacle. Keep fighting for what matters, and I'll see you in the next story.